Chapter 20, Chris. For the next couple of days, we were on lockdown for the investigation of the BGF member's death. On the second day of the lockdown, Snake was bugging me about writing to Lydia's sister, Chris. We were locked up in the cells anyway, so I decided to send her a brief letter. At the last minute, I enclosed a visiting form, and within a week, she had been approved. She was coming up the following Sunday with Lydia. I couldn't believe this was happening so soon. I hadn't even really been thinking too much about it. I hadn't been around any females for quite some time, for years. All I've been concentrating on was my position in the NF and staying alive and keeping the other guys alive. This was something completely out of the blue and new. When Sunday arrived, I was notified that I had a visitor. I wasn't ready to go. I was nervous about meeting Chris. Snake was already dressed and was waiting for Lydia. He came by to pick me up. When he saw I wasn't ready, he told me he'd meet me outside. I started feeling a little anticipatory. There was a strange excitement surging within my chest. I hastily got dressed and pulled on a pressed shirt and pants. I had a nice pair of shine shoes I'd never worn. A quick glance into the mirror and I was on my way. 20 minutes later, Snake and I checked into the visiting area and walked in. When I first laid eyes on Chris, my heart skipped 3 beats and my throat felt like I was being squeezed by a python. Sitting there with Lydia was the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life. She had jet black hair that came down to the middle of her back and looked like silk. Her light brown eyes were clear and amazing and twinkled when she looked at me. The blouse she wore matched her eyes, and the black slacks and open-toe sandals complemented her looks. As I walked towards her, it felt like we were the only 2 people in the room. When we embraced, her hair and perfume were so intoxicating that I forgot all about anything and everything else. When she hugged me, a surge of adrenaline rushed through me. It was one of the most memorable moments in my life. There was a little girl with her that she introduced as Eileen. Eileen was 6 years old and took to me right away. Chris also mentioned she had an 8-year-old son. Eileen had her mother's eyes and smile. Chris was 26 years old, but didn't look a day older than her sister Lydia, who was 2 years younger. Sodas and chips were bought, and we went out to the patio area on the grass. I'll never forget that June summer's day. There was a light breeze and it blew Chris's hair all around. She was so beautiful, and the thought only enhanced her appearance. Chris made me feel like a totally different person. We talked and got to know one another. I wished to myself that day would never end, but like all good things, soon we had to say goodbye. I wasn't sure what to do, so I gave her a kiss on the cheek. I guess that wasn't what she had in mind, however, and she surprised me with a lip-to-lip, tongue-to-tongue kiss. Wow, that's what I call a sweet ending to a perfect day. Chris must have enjoyed herself as well, and she told me that she would be back to see me next weekend. She told me she was going to bring her son, and as she gathered up her things, I told her I would make sure she got home okay. As Snake and I watched the 3 of them go, I was thinking about how nice the visit had been and how I was feeling about Chris. As we turned and headed back to reality, I knew I had to get my mind back on my job. Tomorrow will be another day. The following Sunday, Chris brought little Eileen and her son Victor with her. Eileen ran right up to me and jumped up for a long hug with a big smile on her face. Victor was a little shy at first, but after a few minutes, he relaxed and started talking and asking questions about me. He was a smart kid, but he'd had very little contact with his father. The day was just as nice as the weekend before. Victor and Eileen played together while their mother and I watched and enjoyed each other's company. I started to think about my future and the possibility of becoming a family man. But I was still in prison and I had other obligations as a member and leader of the NF. Snake informed me one afternoon that the brother of Lydia and Chris, nicknamed Little Smiley, was just sentenced along with his crime partner for an NF hit and murder. Snake and Lydia had been engaged for quite a while, and Snake knew how I felt about Chris, and he knew my intentions. He suggested that I talk with Smiley and ask for his blessings and permission to marry Chris. At the time, it seemed like an appropriate suggestion, and I agreed with Snake. I'd wait and talk with Smiley. After Chris found out, though, she wasn't happy at all. That's because she's the big sister, and I'm not going to go all into that situation. Not here. 3 weeks later, Snake informed me that Chris's brother Smiley, who was also an NF member, was housed in C-Wing on the first tier where all of the incoming inmates go for orientation. I went over to the wing to talk with him. He was a little guy in stature and younger than me. This was the first time we met, but he knew of me and who I was through his sister. Smiley and I hit it off right away and became instant friends. I explained how I met his sister through Snake and Lydia in the visiting room and about my intentions to marry Chris. We made small talk and he told me why he was in prison. I could tell that he was sizing me up as a brother-in-law. Then he told me I had good taste and that he knew Chris would be happy to marry me. He went on to say that he had no problem with me taking his sister's hand. He also mentioned that Chris wasn't too happy with the NF due to the fact of what had happened to him. I knew there were a few girls who felt the same way, but that meant little to me. The following weekend when Chris came to visit, I was the excited one who couldn't wait to propose. When I was called for my visit, my heartbeat doubled with anticipation. I knew it was coming. After a few moments of small talk, I dropped to one knee. With the whole visiting room watching, I asked her to be my wife, to which she replied, yes. I would love to be your wife. We spent the rest of the day planning the wedding. Her mother would come and the kids. We'd have to sort through the paperwork needed to compile a guest list. It would be short: Lydia and Snake, Smiley and his girlfriend Mary Lou. 3 weeks later, on a beautiful sunny day, we exchanged vows with each other, sealing a lifetime contract. I didn't believe in divorce. It was a nice wedding with the wedding cake fit for a king and queen. That day will always be remembered. Later that week, when Chris and I were alone, we got to talking about the NF. With Chris having first-hand knowledge of the NF from her brother and knowing my background and rank, she was not surprised at all when I told her to never, ever make me choose between her and the NF. I knew how she felt about the gang, and I felt it was something she needed to understand. A lot of members were telling their girls the same thing, and a lot of them didn't like it. I told her that if I ever had to choose between the two, I would choose the NF over her every time. Nothing more was ever said on the matter.